In the village of Umudim, where the river sang to the stones and the baobab trees told stories in the wind, there lived a girl named Amara. She was not like the other girls who were content with life's simple gifts, a good harvest, a warm hearth, a faithful husband. No, Amara had dreams that reached far beyond the dusty roads and the thatched roofs of her home. She wanted silk, not woven cloth. She wanted gold, not brass. She wanted a life so grand that even the stars would pause to admire her. Her mother, Mama Ifeoma, would shake her head and say, "Amara, a tree does not grow taller by cursing the ground where its seed was planted." But Amara would only laugh, tossing her long braids over her shoulder, her mind filled with visions of palaces and carriages pulled by white horses. Her father, Papa Ejike, was a fisherman. His hands were rough from casting nets, his face creased by the sun and the years. He loved Amara deeply, but could see the storm brewing in her heart. Sometimes he would sit her down by the river, letting the cool water wash over their toes, and say, "The river flows far, my daughter, but it always returns home." Still, Amara's heart beat to a different rhythm. Every morning she would watch the sunrise and whisper to herself, "One day I will leave this place. One day I will have everything." The village loved Amara for her beauty and spirit, but they also whispered behind her back. "She dreams too much," they said. "Dreams can break a girl faster than poverty." But dreams were all Amara had. Their hut was small and smelled of earth and smoke. Dinner was often thin porridge or roasted yams, and nights were spent listening to the distant drumming of festivals they could not afford to attend. Her younger brothers slept huddled together for warmth. Amara, lying awake under a patched cloth, would imagine herself sleeping under silk sheets in a room filled with candles. She could almost taste it, the sweet, rich life she was destined for. And then, one dusty afternoon, as she carried a basket of cassava roots home from the market, she heard the news that would change everything. A group of travelers had arrived in Umudim, their clothes finer than anything the villagers had ever seen. Their horses wore bells on their ankles, and the scent of foreign perfumes followed them, like mist. The travelers carried a royal message. Prince Obinna, heir to the kingdom of Nsukka, was searching for a wife. The announcement was made in the village square. Drums beat the air, and the village elder, with his white beard swaying like a pendulum, read the scroll aloud. "The prince seeks a woman of beauty, grace, and strength, a woman who can stand beside a king. All who believe they are worthy must come forth." The moment the elder's voice faded into the hot afternoon, Amara felt her heart thunder against her ribs. This was it. This was the door she had been waiting to open all her life. Her mother clutched her arm tightly. "Amara, do not chase shadows," Mama Ifeoma warned, eyes wide with fear. "Royalty brings riches, but it also brings curses hidden in silk." But Amara only smiled, a smile so bright it could blind a man. "I was born for more," she said softly. That night, while the village women braided their hair and oiled their skin, in preparation for the royal selection, Amara stood alone by the river. The moon hung low and fat in the sky like a silver drum. She dipped her fingers into the cool water and whispered to the spirits of her ancestors, "Let them see me. Let them choose me." And somewhere in the dark, the river shivered. Whether it was from the whisper of destiny or the warning of fate, no one could tell. The next morning, the entire village of Umudim was awake before the sun. Women were polishing beads and ironing wrappers. Young men were sweeping the paths with handmade brooms. Even the elders, usually content to sit in the shade chewing kola nuts, were bustling with excitement. A prince was coming, a real prince, not just a story whispered around the fires at night. Amara sat in front of the mirror, a cracked piece of glass propped against the wall. Her mother pulled a comb through her thick hair, braiding it with tiny shells and golden threads borrowed from the village tailor. Each pull of the comb felt like a tug against her heart, tightening it with hope. "Remember," Mama Ifeoma whispered as she worked, "beauty can open a door, but it is the heart that keeps it open." Amara barely heard her. Her mind was already flying. Ahead, to the palace gardens, to silk gowns brushing marble floors, to gold bangles heavy on her wrists. By midday, the drums began. They were not the simple drums of village festivals. No, these drums spoke of power. Deep and rolling like thunder, they made the ground itself seem to tremble. Children rushed to the village square, their bare feet kicking up dust. Men straightened their tunics. Women adjusted their headscarves. Amara walked slowly, deliberately, her every step measured like a queen in a forgotten legend. When she reached the square, her breath caught in her throat. The prince had arrived. Prince Obinna was not like the boys of Umudim. He sat tall on a white horse, his robe stitched with silver patterns that shimmered under the blazing sun. Around him, his guards stood silent and fierce, their spears catching the light. But it was not the prince's riches that silenced the crowd. It was the way he looked, as if he had stepped straight out of a god's dream. His skin was the deep brown of the richest soil, his eyes sharp like the hawk that circled the hills beyond the village. His smile, rare and slight, was a weapon more dangerous than any sword. He dismounted, and the village elder hurried forward to kneel. "Welcome, my prince. Welcome to Umudim, land of brave hearts and pure souls." Prince Obinna nodded once, regal and cold. His gaze swept over the gathering like a tide, making hearts stumble in their chests. Then he spoke, his voice low and powerful. "I have journeyed far and wide, seeking a woman not just of beauty but of spirit, one who will stand beside me through prosperity and ruin alike. Step forward if you believe you are worthy." A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Some girls stepped forward. The butcher's daughter with her round cheeks, the baker's niece with her shy smile, the chief's proud daughter, who carried herself like a queen already. But when Amara stepped into the open, the world seemed to stop spinning. The prince's eyes found her instantly. He tilted his head, studying her as a warrior studies an opponent before battle. Amara bowed low, feeling the weight of every prayer she had ever whispered pressing down on her shoulders. A smile ghosted across Obinna's lips, a smile not of happiness but of decision. He turned to his men and said, "Prepare the bride price." The village erupted in gasps. Mothers clutched their daughters. Fathers exchanged stunned glances. No one had expected the prince to choose so quickly, and so certainly. That evening, while the orange sun melted into the horizon, gifts flooded. Amara's home, bolts of fine cloth in colors she had never even dreamed of, necklaces of coral and gold, fat cows tethered to their gates, boxes of spices and perfumes that carried the scent of faraway oceans. Amara sat in the middle of it all, her eyes shining brighter than the morning star. Her brothers danced in circles, drunk on the joy of riches they had never known. Her mother wept, not tears of happiness, but tears heavy with something Amara could not understand. And her father, silent and grave, placed a hand on Amara's shoulder and said only, "Be careful what you chase, my daughter. Sometimes it chases you back." But Amara was already far away, her mind lost in visions of silk crowns and endless halls of gold. She was to marry a prince. Her life, she thought, was finally beginning. Little did she know, the true story, the one that would carve itself into her soul, had only just opened its first page. The wedding preparations began at once, and for the first time Amara's village tasted the sweet fruit of fortune. The dirt paths were swept until they gleamed red under the sun. New huts were painted in bright colors, and musicians traveled, from distant towns carrying talking drums, flutes, and choras that whispered old songs into the evening breeze. Amara was a vision. Tailors stitched her wedding dress from imported silk, dyed the blue of deep ocean waters. The gold jewelry coiled around her neck and wrists like living snakes. Her hair was piled high, decorated with coral beads, her skin glowing under sacred oils. "She is not a village girl anymore," the women whispered, both envious and awestruck. "She is a queen." But in the shadows of celebration, quiet doubt stirred. Mama Ifeoma sat at the threshold of her hut, her weaving forgotten in her lap. Her eyes, old and wise, watched the festivities with a heart too heavy to join in. Papa Ejike carved a small wooden statue by the fire, a fisherman in a small boat, but he carved not with pride, but with sorrow pressing on every stroke. Their daughter was leaving, and they knew she was not just marrying a man, she was marrying a destiny from which there would be no easy return. The night before the wedding, the village held a great feast. Fires blazed high into the starry sky. Children danced until their laughter became breathless gasps. Women sang songs so old that even the river paused to listen. Amara stood alone on the edge of the gathering, looking up at the moon. It shone, full and heavy, casting a silver path across the river, a path that led away from home, away from everything she had ever known. For the first time, she felt a flicker of unease. "Are you afraid?" a voice asked behind her. She turned. It was Obinna, dressed in a tunic embroidered with the golden lion of his house. "No," Amara lied, lifting her chin. "I have been waiting for this my whole life." Obinna smiled, a thin, unreadable smile. "Good," he said, "because once you step into the palace, you will belong to a world that does not forgive the weak." Amara's heart skipped a beat, but pride pushed the fear down deep where she could not hear it. "I am not weak," she whispered. Obinna said nothing more. He took her hand, his fingers cool against her burning skin, and together they returned to the circle of firelight. At dawn, the wedding began. The village square was transformed into a temple of color and sound. Drums pounded like the heartbeat of the earth. Dancers spun in dizzying patterns, their anklets jingling in the rising sun. The ceremony was old, older than memory. The village elder chanted blessings in a tongue few still understood, and sacred kola nuts were broken and passed. Between the families, Obinna placed a golden ring on Amara's finger, a ring so heavy she wondered if it would sink her to the ground. She vowed her loyalty to him, her voice steady though her hands trembled just slightly. When it was over, the prince lifted her veil and kissed her forehead, sealing the union. Cheers erupted across Umudim. Men beat their drums harder, and women let out ululations that rose into the skies like flocks of wild birds. Gifts rained upon Amara, cloth, livestock, coins, and perfumes. She was the girl who had married a prince. She was the dream made flesh. But even as the celebration soared around her, Amara felt a strange tightness in her chest. The sky, once a brilliant blue, seemed just a shade darker. The river's song, once playful, now hummed a warning she could not quite understand. Yet still she smiled, dazzling and proud for all to see. Her journey was beginning. What she did not know was that the path ahead was not paved with gold, but with sorrow hidden under silken carpets, sorrow waiting with open arms. The journey to the palace took 3 days, across winding rivers, dense forests, and endless golden plains. Amara rode beside Prince Obinna in a grand carriage lined with velvet. Behind them, servants carried trunks filled with gifts, cloths finer than spider silk, gold heavy enough to weigh down a king. As the carriage moved farther, from Umudim, Amara watched the landscape change. The huts of her village gave way to sprawling fields. The laughter of familiar voices faded into silence. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if the very earth warned her to turn back. But Amara sat straight and proud. She was a queen now. Queens. Do not look back. At last, as the sun sank low behind the mountains, the palace rose into view, a sprawling fortress of marble and gold, its towers reaching toward the clouds. It was more magnificent than Amara had ever imagined. Servants in white robes lined the road, bowing low as the carriage passed. Musicians played flutes made of bone, their haunting melodies weaving into the warm evening air. When Amara stepped out of the carriage, a hush fell over the crowd. She glowed under the sunset, her gown shimmering with every movement. Prince Obinna took her hand and led her through the grand gates. The palace swallowed her whole. Inside, the halls were vast and echoing, the walls lined with ancient tapestries that told the stories of kings and wars long past. Chandeliers made of crystal lit the corridors like captured stars. Everywhere servants bowed and kept their eyes down. At the heart of the palace was the royal chamber, Obinna's private world. It was here that Amara first felt the chill. Despite the riches, the gold-framed mirrors, the velvet curtains, the endless tables laden with fruit and meat, there was a stillness, a lifelessness, that clung to the walls like old cobwebs. Obinna's smile, so warm in the village, had cooled into something unreadable. He showed her to her new rooms, grand chambers overlooking the palace gardens, and then left without a word. No gentle good night. No lover's whisper. Just the sound of his footsteps disappearing into the distance. Amara stood alone in her new kingdom. For the first time, she noticed the palace's true sound. Not music, not laughter, but echoes. Lonely, restless echoes that bounced from stone to stone, filling every grand hall with a silence more deafening than any noise. That night, as she lay on a bed too large for one soul, Amara stared at the high ceiling carved with images of forgotten gods. She thought of her mother's words, about curses hidden in silk, and shivered under blankets that smelled faintly of dust. She dreamt of rivers. She dreamt of running. She dreamt of doors that would not open. When the morning came, Amara rose and dressed herself in the finest robes. She walked the palace grounds seeking company, laughter, life. But the halls were empty. The servants bowed and vanished around corners. Even the gardens, lush and wild, seemed strangely still, as if they too had been ordered not to speak. In the throne room, Amara found Obinna seated on a golden chair, staring into nothing. "Good morning, my prince," she said softly. He did not look at her. "There are rules," he said, voice flat. "You must never leave the palace walls without permission. You must never speak to the royal advisors unless I permit it, and you must never, ever enter the western wing." Amara frowned. "Why?" she dared to ask. Obinna's eyes, once warm, turned cold as stone. "Because this palace has secrets," he said, "and secrets do not forgive the curious." He rose and left her standing there, his robes swirling like dark mist around his feet. Amara clutched her hands together, her wedding ring heavy on her finger. Was this the life she had traded her soul for? Outside, the palace gates loomed high and unbreakable. Inside, the walls whispered with things she could not yet name, and far away in the village she had left behind, the river sang on, a song of home, of warnings unheeded, of a girl who had dreamed too high and too far. Days turned into weeks, and weeks folded into months. But for Amara, time inside the palace felt like a bird trapped in a golden cage, fluttering, desperate, unseen. Every morning, she dressed in rich gowns embroidered with the threads of 100 colors. Every evening, she dined alone at a long table set with more food than a village could eat in a week. Obinna was rarely there. He spent most of his days behind the closed doors of the council chamber, speaking in low, urgent tones with men whose faces were always hidden behind masks of authority. When Amara tried to ask about her role as his wife, her duties, her purpose, Obinna's answers were sharp and cold. "You are here to be seen, not heard," he said one night, sipping palm, wine from a silver goblet, the words cut deeper than any knife. In the beginning, Amara clung to hope. Perhaps once the coronation was complete, perhaps once the kingdom settled, he would remember her. Perhaps love would grow like vines over these hard stones, but the hope, like a plant left in darkness, withered with each passing day. And yet, the mystery of the western wing burned in her mind like a living fire. Every corridor in the palace was open to her, grand libraries, fragrant gardens, treasure rooms stacked with ancient gold, except one. The western wing was sealed with heavy iron doors, guarded day and night by silent soldiers. Whenever she passed it, a cold wind seemed to whisper against her skin, even though the palace walls were thick and impenetrable. One evening, while wandering the halls to escape the heavy silence of her chambers, Amara found herself once again near the forbidden wing. The guards had stepped away, perhaps summoned elsewhere. The heavy doors stood before her, slightly ajar. Her heart raced. One look, she thought. What harm can one look do? Driven by a force she could not name, Amara slipped through the crack and into the darkness beyond. At first she could see nothing. The air was cold and damp, smelling of old wood and something fouler, something rotten. She moved slowly, her silk slippers whispering against the stone floor. Then she saw them, portraits, hundreds of them, lining the walls. Women, beautiful women. Each one dressed in royal robes, their faces painted with delicate, sorrowful detail. At first Amara thought they were ancestors, queens of old, but as she moved closer, her stomach turned. Each woman's eyes were painted wide, too wide, and their mouths, though smiling, seemed stretched in terror. Some portraits had scratches across the faces, as if someone had tried to erase their existence but failed, and beneath each portrait, a plaque with names written in trembling gold: Queen Adana, gone too soon; Queen Oluchi, lost to the shadows; Queen Nena, silence forever. Hundreds of names, hundreds of lost queens. Amara's breath hitched. Her fingers trembled as she touched the frame of the nearest portrait. The wood was cold as a corpse. A soft sound behind her made her turn. It was Obinna. He stood in the shadows, his face half lit by a torch on the wall. But his eyes burned like coals. "You should not have come here," he said quietly. Amara opened her mouth, but no words came. Obinna stepped closer, the air between them thick with something ancient and cruel. "You see now," he said, voice low. "Every wife of the royal bloodline is bound to this fate. Wealth without freedom, beauty without peace, life without love." He raised a hand, and for a moment Amara thought he might strike her. Instead, he simply touched her cheek, a gesture so cold it made her flinch. "You married me for gold," he whispered. "Now you will stay for eternity." Amara staggered back, her mind spinning. The Golden Palace was a tomb. She was not a queen. She was a prisoner, like all the queens before her. The echoes in the halls, the silence in the gardens, the sadness in the servants' eyes. It all made sense now. The palace did not hum with life. It thrived on lost souls. As Obinna turned and walked away, locking the heavy doors behind him, Amara sank to the floor. Tears streamed down her face, hot and bitter. Her dreams had brought her here. Her hunger for riches had chained her to a curse, older than memory. In the heart of gold she had found a grave, and now she realized escaping would not be as easy as walking through an open door, because some cages, once entered, never let you leave. After that night, the palace became a different world for Amara. The walls that once gleamed with splendor now pressed in like the ribs of a beast. The chandeliers seemed colder, their light weak against the heavy shadows creeping through the corridors. The beautiful gardens, once fragrant and lush, now smelled faintly of decay. Amara lived as a ghost in her own skin. She obeyed every rule. She stayed within the palace walls. She spoke only when spoken to. She wore the finest clothes and dined at silent tables. But inside her heart, a rebellion grew, slow and silent, like a seed buried deep under frozen soil. She thought of the other queens, their painted faces staring endlessly from the walls of the western wing. They had given up, she realized. They had accepted their fates. But Amara, she would not be another sad name written in trembling gold. She began to plan. During the long, empty afternoons, she explored the palace quietly, mapping the corridors, learning the paths the guards took, noting which windows faced the outer gardens, which doors creaked too loudly, which staircases led to forgotten parts of the palace. She befriended the kitchen maid, Chica, a girl with quick hands and quicker eyes. Chica spoke little, but in the stolen moments when they met, her hands would flash secret messages. "Be careful. The prince sees everything." Even so, Amara could feel the invisible leash tightening around her neck. One evening, as the crimson sun dipped behind the palace walls, Obinna summoned her to the throne room. He sat in his great golden chair, a figure carved from stone. Around him, the advisors stood like silent shadows. Amara knelt before him, her head bowed, her fists clenched inside her silk sleeves. "You have disappointed me," Obinna said, his voice low and dangerous. "You wander where you should not, you think what you should not." The advisors murmured like a distant storm. Obinna rose from his throne, his robes whispering along the polished floor. "You must understand, Amara," he said. "You are mine, as were all who came before you." He circled her slowly, like a predator savoring its prey. "If you try to escape," he whispered near her ear, "the palace will swallow you whole." Amara bit her tongue to keep from speaking. The fury inside her blazed like a hidden fire, but she knew now was not the time. That night, alone in her chambers, she stared at the moon through the high windows and remembered her father's words. "The river flows far, but it always returns home. Maybe she had floated too far from Umudim. Maybe the river inside her needed to find its way back. Somewhere beyond these walls, her family still waited. Her mother still wove baskets under the shade of the baobab trees. Her father still sang, to the river. And she was not dead yet. Amara crafted her plan carefully. At dawn, when the palace stirred lazily and the guards changed their posts, she would slip away. She would use the servants' passageways, the ones Chica had shown her. She would scale the southern wall where the vines grew thick and heavy. She would leave behind the gold, the silks, the cursed promises. All she needed was courage and timing. The night before her escape, Amara sat on the cold marble floor of her chamber and prayed, not to the gods of gold and power, but to the spirits of her ancestors, the same spirits she had once whispered to by the river as a girl with stars in her eyes. "Guide me," she whispered. "Forgive me." The wind outside howled low, almost like an answer. Somewhere deep in the palace, a door creaked. Somewhere deeper still, an old clock struck midnight, a slow, heavy toll. Amara rose to her feet, her heart steady. She had traded freedom for gold. Once, she would not make the same mistake twice. Tomorrow she would run. And if the palace was a beast, if the prince was a demon clothed in royalty, if the gold was a trap, then she would fight her way out with nothing but her bare hands and the river's song in her blood. Tomorrow the river inside her would find its way home, or she would die trying. The palace breathed slowly in its sleep. The guards shifted lazily at their posts, and under the heavy glow of a blood-red moon, Amara prepared to take her life back. She wore no jewels that night, no silks to slow her down, only a plain wrapper, tied tightly around her waist and sturdy sandals stolen from a servant's quarters. In her hand she clutched a small pouch of cowrie shells, her only treasure now, a reminder of the home she had once known. Chica had done her part. At great risk, she had left one door in the servants' wing unlocked. One chance, one breath, one prayer. Amara crept silently through the darkened halls. The marble floors were cold under her feet. The torches burned low, casting flickering shadows that twisted like spirits against the walls. She knew the path by heart now, left at the statue of the Lion King, right past the dry fountain where no water had flowed for years. Down the narrow, stone stairway that led to the servants' tunnels, her heart thundered in her chest. Every beat sounded too loud, too wild. At the tunnel entrance she paused. She glanced back once, at the towering halls, the golden ceilings, the endless empty beauty of it all. "Goodbye," she whispered. And she ran. The tunnels were damp and narrow, the walls sweating with old moisture. The smell of earth filled her. "Those?" Her hands scraped against rough stones as she pushed forward. Behind her, the palace remained silent. Ahead of her, freedom breathed like a timid creature waiting to be caught. She reached the southern wall just as the night clouds parted, and the blood moon bathed the world in a haunting red light. The wall was taller than she remembered. The vines, though thick, trembled under the cool night breeze, but Amara did not hesitate. She climbed, her fingers gripping the vines, her sandals slipping against the rough stone. Halfway up, a vine tore loose, and she dangled for one heart-stopping moment over the hard stones below. But she gritted her teeth, reached higher, and pulled herself upward. Voices, somewhere below, the guards had noticed. Their shouts broke the silence of the night like spears. "Halt! Stop her! Seize the queen! Queen!" The words stung her ears. She was no queen. She was a prisoner, a fool who had traded her soul for a handful of gold. Amara climbed faster, the vines scraping her skin, the stone tearing at her palms. The top of the wall loomed close, so close. Just one more reach. A hand closed around her ankle. She screamed, kicking hard, feeling the guard's grip slip. The vines around her quivered. The world tilted. For one horrifying second, she thought, she would fall. But the river inside her, the river of her father's songs, her mother's prayers, her own burning dreams, surged through her. With a final, desperate cry, she wrenched free and hurled herself over the wall. She landed hard. On the other side, rolling across the rough dirt, pain exploded in her shoulder. Her head spun, but she was free. The guards' shouts grew fainter behind her. Amara forced herself to her feet and ran like the spirits of her ancestors carried her, like the river sang beneath her skin. She did not look back. The palace, with all its gold and all its curses, shrank into the distance. Ahead, the land stretched wide and wild under the blood-red sky. She ran until her legs gave out, until the earth rose up and caught her. And as she lay there, gasping under the stars, a strange sound rose from her chest, broken at first, then stronger. Laughter. Not laughter of joy, but of survival, of defiance, of a girl who had lost everything but found herself. Amara pressed her hand against the earth and whispered, "I am not yours anymore." The wind answered with a gentle sigh. Somewhere far beyond the hills, the river called her name, and this time she was ready to listen. Amara wandered for days through the wild lands, guided only by the stars above and the whispering voice of the river in her heart. She crossed grassy plains where lions roared at dusk, and shadowed forests where ancient spirits watched from behind twisted trees. Her feet bled, her hands grew rough, her body weakened, but her spirit, the same spirit that had once dared to dream beyond the dusty roads of Umudim, grew stronger with every step. At night she would sleep under the open sky, the moon her only guardian. And in her dreams she saw her mother's hands weaving baskets, her father's voice rising in song with the river's flow. "You are not lost," the river seemed to tell her. "You are finding your way." One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of fire, Amara crested a hill, and her breath caught in her throat. Below her, sprawled out like a memory come to life, was Umudim, the same crooked paths, the same patchwork roofs, the same giant baobab tree standing watch at the village square. For a long moment she could not move. Fear wrapped itself around her ankles. Would they remember her? Would they welcome her? Or would they turn their backs on the girl who had abandoned them for gold? Trembling, she descended the hill. The village was busy with evening tasks, women drawing water, men repairing nets, children chasing goats through the dusty lanes. At first, no one noticed the thin, dusty figure walking toward them. Not until she passed the old well and a boy gasped. "Amara," he whispered, dropping his clay pot. Heads turned. Voices rose. "Is it her?" "Is it truly Amara?" She stood there, heart pounding, too weak to speak. Then, through the gathering crowd, her mother appeared, Mama Ifeoma. Her hair had grown grayer, her back more stooped. But her eyes, her fierce, loving eyes, were the same. For a heartbeat, mother and daughter stared at each other across the years and the pain. Then Mama Ifeoma opened her arms. Without a word, Amara ran into them. She wept, great, shuddering, sobs that shook her very bones. Her mother held her tight, rocking her as if she were still a child. "My daughter," she whispered into Amara's tangled hair. "My river has returned." The village gathered close, not with anger, but with wonder. They listened in silence as Amara, voice broken, heart wide open, told her story. She spoke of the golden palace, the endless loneliness, the portraits of lost queens, the night she ran for her life under the blood moon. When she finished, no one spoke for a long time. Then Papa Ejike, old and steady as the river, stepped forward. He placed his rough hand on her head and said, "You were never lost. You simply had to find your way back to yourself." And just like that, Amara was home. She chose not to rebuild her life with gold or silk. She wove baskets with her mother under the baobab tree. She sang by the river with her brothers. She danced at the festivals, not in royal gowns, but in the bright, simple clothes of her people. And every morning, when the sun rose over Umudim, she gave thanks, not for riches, not for crowns, but for the freedom to laugh, to love, and to live. Years later, travelers who passed through the village would hear the story of the girl who had married a prince and escaped a curse. They would ask to meet her, and they would find not a broken woman, not a fallen queen, but a weaver with strong hands, a singer with a joyful heart, a woman richer than any gold could ever make her. When they asked her how she survived, she would smile and say, "Gold shines, but it blinds. Love roots you like the river, and a free heart, A free heart is worth more than all the crowns in the world. And somewhere, far beyond the hills, the river would carry her words, flowing eternal, unbroken, just like her.